Welcome to Through the Glass Columns, your weekly Wheel of Time read along podcast. The Wheel of Time turns and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth comes again.
That is your host, Greg, who somehow still knows very little about the Wheel of Time, even though he usually pretends otherwise.
And that is Tylor, our resident expert, who makes sure you know how much he knows about the Wheel of Time.
It's a lot. Join us each week as we continue our journey through Robert Jordan's great fantasy epic, exploring the books, the television show, ill-advised discussions of visual media on a non-visual podcast, and so much more. Although actually not, it's just that.
Yes, all that and actually nothing else as we travel on, and I know what this means now, through the glass columns.
Yeah, he really doesn't know all that much.
No, you don't know that much.
Well, look at that. You found Through the Glass Columns, your weekly read along Wheel of Time podcast. I'm your host, Greg, who is very excited to be here to talk to you this week about two chapters from Lord of Chaos. Tyler, don't laugh that I had to just look at the title of the book on the cover. Chapter 47, The Wandering Woman, and Chapter 48, Leaning on the Knife. One of our astute hosts guessed that The Wandering Woman was a tavern, and he was right. And then the other host is Tyler. Tyler, how's it going?
It's going very well. I don't know how I feel about the fact that you were the most enthusiastic that you've been about this show in a while in that intro on the week that we're like, I don't know if this episode is going to last a half an hour. That doesn't feel great for my self-esteem. But you're right. We've got some interesting chapters this week. Nothing groundbreaking, nothing earth-shattering. I'm left with the question, I think, after all of this, hey, Greg, do you think this book actually has an ending, or are you kind of expecting just to fizzle at this point?
I mean, the amount after my bookmark is getting very, very thin, right? I think we're at like 130 pages or so left in
right,
this
yeah.
one. So I was surprised to see this plot get into a little bit of a holding pattern. So the two chapters focus on the plot line, of course, with Matt and Nynaeve and Elaine. And it seemed to me the goal across the two, and I'm not meaning to steal the thunder from your summaries, is just let's establish how these people feel about each other so that we can then have the kind of big action set piece where you don't want to pause in those descriptions to then be like,
Yeah.
and Matt was slightly annoyed with Elaine because for the last 3 weeks, blah, 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 blah. So it felt important to me that we get all this kind of laid down. But I did cheat just a little, and I saw we're switching plot lines next chapter, next week. But that's
You
getting
stole
way
my
too far
outro
ahead.
question. Oh, how dare you.
All right. Well, let's get on with it. Let's hear your summary of The Wandering Woman.
Chapter 47, The Wandering Woman. Matt rides with a group of the band and Nynaeve and company. The women's camp is divided, with Vandine and Adelios trying to run things, and the other women clearly very upset about it. Matt notes that the band didn't bring supplies, so they are now eating all of Narim's fancy food, which I just thought was a really funny scene. Ulver clearly wants to eat with the women, but still doesn't trust Avienda enough to be willing to go along with them. Eventually, Matt sends Chel Vannon to find a missing scout, and Elaine directly addresses his Terangrial, saying that she wishes to study it overnight and will return it in the mornings. He denies even knowing what a Terangrial is and says he owes them nothing, and at this point she compliments the handling of his men and leaves, and then his medallion immediately goes cold, and the women are clearly quietly discussing whatever happened with the medallion. They continue on their journey, and Elaine eventually begins inspecting Matt's troops and giving them compliments, and Matt wants to tell Elaine no to basically anything, but she refuses to ask him for anything other than the things that he needs to do without anyone telling him. The soldiers actually at this point start saluting her, and Matt gets frustrated at how well she is winning them over. Matt can't seem to get anywhere with any of the women, and Brigitte avoids him entirely, and eventually Matt approaches Nynaeve to talk, and she literally shouts at him to leave her alone and then keeps her distance. Eventually they find an inn on their travels, and Matt learns that there are customs in Ibudar around duels, and also he learns about the marriage knife wife, something that is typically given by men to the women they are marrying, encouraging them to kill them if they do something wrong. Matt notes the tension between all of the women and wonders why Nynaeve and Elaine aren't deferring more to Vandene and Adelias, and when he talks to Tom and Julian, they seem kind of almost pleased about the conflict with the women because it hasn't escalated even further, and Matt eventually learns that Brigitte is a warder from Tom, but they let Matt go on thinking she is just a hunter for the horn and nothing more. Elaine apparently taking a female warder is part of the tension between her and the older Aes Sedai, and Julian nearly chokes when Matt wonders if Brigitte can actually shoot her bow. Matt decides to ignore the women despite the medallion repeatedly going cold throughout their travels, and the women seem to all be studying him. Matt eventually at an inn gets drunk on the hard stuff that even his other men aren't willing to drink, and eventually realizes that even with how poorly things seem to be going, he's at least happy with the protection he is provided by his amulet. He's in a bad mood as they approach Ibudar, probably because he's hungover, and eventually they find an inn near a massive palace. The inn seems lovely and peaceful, but Matt feels the dice beginning to fall in his head. The Aes Sedai go to make contact at the palace, which Matt regrets because he doesn't like palaces and all of the nobles who are in them, so he insists that an inn will be where he and the band stay. Eventually, he chooses an inn literally at random, and Tom and Julian go with the women rather than going to the inn with him. The inn is called the Wandering Woman, and it is run by Mistress Anan, whose name you should remember, Greg, and the dice in his head have stopped rolling as soon as Matt introduces himself to Mistress Anan. I don't mean you should remember her name from before. I mean you should remember her name for many, many books to come. Greg, what did you think of The Wandering Woman?
I mean, first of all, it just sounds funny when you ask questions about the chapter. Yeah. There's a wandering woman in my town. So I was reminded, so I read this morning before my kids got up, and then we have a kind of tradition or, just routine in our household where when the kids get up, they get to watch a show and, have their breakfast and just kind of chill out, especially on the weekends. And my daughter picked Bluey, something that we are both massive fans of. And it was the episode where the dad's like, hey, let's go to Uncle's pool. And they go to the pool and the dad did like none of the responsible things bringing all the stuff. And then the mom shows up later with all the stuff and saves the day, which is, often how the father-mother dynamics go in my family. But it also just struck me directly that was what I had just read with Elaine and Matt, right? Yep. Matt's like, yeah, let's do this. Let's go. Oh, I'm supposed to bring food for my troops and I'm supposed to have like a real plan here. So, I mean, all of that is to say, I thought it was supposed to demonstrate that for all the ways in which Matt has advanced as a leader, he's still not like on top of his game. And I just thought he was getting outclassed by Elaine at every turn.
Yeah, I think that's right. This is a chapter that makes me go, oh, Matt, you're really competent at a lot of things, but not this. Not like day-to-day dealing with the administration, not figuring out how do you interact with women who you don't want to sleep with. That's a real challenge for Matt. And I think the real thing that I found interesting about this chapter kind of overall, if we're taking the temperature, is how much it felt like Matt was missing little things that I wanted to know and the narration wasn't giving me. And that kind of idea that Matt is so plugged into certain details but is just missing whatever is going on with the social dynamic with, especially between Nynaeve and Elaine and Vandene and Adelias, I thought was really fun and really well done, and then almost really frustrating that like 5 pages later we get that from the other side, and so we don't get to play with that delicious what do we know and what do we not.
Yeah, and I still get stuck on like who's in control of Matt, and in this one it feels like it's much more the Two Rivers naive boy than whatever other presence is in him, I guess, until the end when we get the prominence of the dice and his luck returning, but it really felt to me like I would not trust Matt even to move troops around. Like you just said in your comment that, he's got some really good skills. We've heard he's a great martial leader, but I don't know. He seems a little foolish.
There is nothing funnier to me as a follow-up to that than a small child saying, yeah, I'd rather eat kippered eel than go hang out with those ladies. Like, that is just prime comedy for me. And I think it's exactly what you're describing. It's this idea that Matt, for everything he does well, kind of relies on the stuck-up jerk of a servant in order to survive in this scene.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And you know, especially because Elaine is elevating right now to be, we assume, about to take the throne, it really just feels like he's regressing.
Well, and I felt like that first interaction between Elaine and Matt is kind of telling, where she is kind of coming like open hands, like, I will tell you whatever you want to know. Let's just have a conversation. And she's like, look, I want to make a deal for how I can study this Terangrial. And his response is more or less like, no, I don't make deals with stinky girls. And then he walks away. And I thought that is, as you say, kind of a serious misreading by Matt. He is clearly being outclassed and doesn't even know it in the later conversations. But it also kind of sets up this really interesting dynamic of Matt versus the world throughout this chapter, where it's clear the women are coordinating and they're talking to one another. And Matt's kind of isolation is what came through to me the further we got into this chapter. It's not just that he's outclassed, it's that he's outclassed and alone against a pretty united front.
Yeah, I also had the word isolation in my notes, and that's just increasingly it felt like it's not got that kind of humorous edge, except maybe the Kipper Deal moment, but like he doesn't. It feels more like it's dangerous to get him alone and isolated. And you know, I thought the conversation about the Terangrial was nicely symbolic of this, where he can't even seem to recall that Moraine explained Terangrial to him in front of Elaine, I believe, or Nynaeve, one of them. So it's like he can't even keep his own history straight anymore. Is that an effect of what's going on with him? Or is it just that, you know, he's being young and naive and foolish, where the girls have really become, you know, leaders and thinkers and strategists?
The thing that I love about Matt is that I literally never know whether he doesn't remember things or whether he just says he doesn't remember them because that's the kind of guy he is. Like, there are too many options in situations like this with Matt. I think he's too much of a wild card for me to even guess exactly what is going on in his head at all times. I thought that him figuring out Birgitta was kind of a really fun game that was kind of played throughout this chapter, of him kind of noticing some things about her and how familiar she feels, but also getting nowhere close to the correct answer. He's still like, oh, she's probably just a hunter for the horn. And other than her being a warder, Matt seems kind of out of the loop on this. I'm kind of excited to see what happens when those two characters really interact, because they both have ties to deep history. And so Robert Jordan kind of deliberately keeping them apart feels notable to me.
Yes. And, you know, I guess to phrase it as a question, we don't know of Matt's other kind of deep history identity having an interaction with Birgitta. We're just assuming he does based on these kind of hints in this information here. And it's pretty fun. I mean, you noted a moment ago kind of a limitation of the limited perspective of a narrator, and this is a fun use of it, right? Where we know all the answers and the characters are trying to figure it out, and we get to kind of giggle and smirk. And so I agree, it works well in this regard.
There's one part of this chapter that I can't decide if it's really good or really clunky, because Robert Jordan does some like really effective world building for Ibu Dar and the town and the city, and particularly the marriage customs. We get all this detail about like dueling and the marriage knife, and I think it's in the next chapter we get some more details about like what they represent. But all of this felt really interesting, and it's things that I remember. If you asked me to describe Ibudari marriage rites, I probably could give you a decent amount of this off the top of my head. It's not nothing, but it's also just like thrown in the middle of a scene of Matt being like, and then I learned about marriage knives. And I wasn't quite sure here whether this is good world building poorly delivered, or whether you feel like Matt is able to mat it up enough that it works.
I mean, I'm probably more the former than the latter. I didn't find it to be that engaging. It definitely felt to me, I won't pick on you, my beloved dungeon master, but like in a video game, when you come to a new village and your dialogue tree is like, what is this town like? And they're like, let me tell you about our strange marriage customs. And you're like, well, no actual person in a village would offer this immediately, but you just want to have that color to the world. So you're right,
Good.
it's kind of necessary.
I thought you were gonna be mad at that, and I was like, no, we can't be friends anymore. But good,
No,
read the entire dialogue tree.
You need it in the mix, but it's always like, well, this is not how the verisimilitude fades away in those moments, which is just kind of necessary. And I think that's true here as well, that, you know, a dunderhead like me needs kind of notable things to hang on for what makes this culture different than the other culture, different than that. And so you need that kind of quick and dirty, remember that this is the one with the weird marriage ones. Remember that this is the one where they play the game of the houses. Remember that this is the one with the stone in it. Those kind of quick, easy things. So I think it's just necessary, but it wasn't like I was like, ooh, I hope the next chapter's all about this.
No, totally. I want to contrast two characters and their interaction with Matt next, because Nynaeve literally shouts at Matt to not talk to her, as opposed to Tom and Julian, who seem friendly and talk and what have you, but they don't seem to be giving Matt much of anything other than about Birgitta. Like, it feels like they are deliberately choosing the one subject that they can't get in trouble for talking to Matt about. I'm curious what your thoughts are on, like, what is going on behind the scenes of this chapter, because it's clear there were some, like, direct conversations between characters about how to deal with Matt.
Yes, and I'll back into that question by saying what becomes clear is nobody has Matt at the top of their loyalty, right? Like, everybody else is more loyal to Elaine, and it actually kind of felt like, you know, when you have that friend that maybe didn't go to college for a year, like, you know, 1 year behind you in high school, which isn't a big deal until half of you go to college, and then it's like, oh, we don't really talk about those things with you, and we're not like that anymore, right? Or we don't make those jokes. And it just feels like Matt has been just left behind by them all. Behind the scenes, I assume Elaine is being very specific about what she wants shared and what she doesn't want shared, because she would be thinking in terms of the giant chess game, and so keeps Matt in the dark so that she can achieve her goals and everybody just falls in line with her. Nynaeve, it seemed tinged a little bit more with just like, you're annoying, right? You're just the goofy kid from my village. I really don't want to talk to you anymore.
So I think where I'm kind of left at or at least as we arrive to Ibudar then, is what do you think Elaine is getting at? I think this is the one thing that we don't really have in the next chapter. Since it's from Nynaeve's point of view, we know Elaine is interested in kind of winning over Matt's soldiers and maybe getting him to follow her orders unconsciously or consciously. We know that Elaine is interested in the ter'angreal, but I also don't know how much she's getting out of studying the ter'angreal from the distance she is, and it seems like Matt is actively pushing back against her try to win him over with kindness routine. Is she getting what she wants? Is she playing a chess game and Matt's playing checkers so the moves don't work? What's your read on this situation at the end of this chapter?
I think a good political leader locks down variables, right? And I think that's what Elaine is trying to do. The ter'angreal is a big variable, right? Because there may be a moment when they have to exert control over Matt or influence or what have you. And I think the language is in this chapter where she says something like, it does something that it shouldn't be able to do, right? Like, it's that level of mystery. They can use the language of a ter'angreal, but it does seem to be kind of more powerful or unlike any they've previously encountered. So I don't think she's achieving her goal. I think she needs to see it up close, or else wouldn't have put on the kind of hard pressure to do so. And I don't think she's quite locking that variable down. So she's instead controlling the other people around her so that if she can't control Matt, as we were saying, Matt is at least isolated. That's good politics. It's good, like, middle school socialization as well. So, you know, it just feels like that's the game she's playing at this time.
You're laughing like that comparison isn't the most apt way to describe politics. I think you've hit that nail pretty much on the head. We then arrive in the city of Ibudar, and the two notable things that happen are the dice start spinning in Matt's head, and then he picks an inn, and the dice stop spinning in Matt's head. Do you get the feeling that this is a good thing that has just happened, a dangerous thing that has just happened? The dice stopping spinning means monumental, but in which direction do you think the wandering woman will be for this story?
I hadn't even questioned in my own head that it was a good thing. It felt like, the will of the Force or his spidey sense sending him to this tavern. And even without you hinting that I should remember this name, it felt like the way she kind of announced herself and the way he kind of proclaimed, like, I'm so glad to be here, and repeats her name. It felt monumental in an important way, right? Andor comes to mind of late, where you had two characters in the third from the end episode, or pretty late, meet for the first time, and it was very strange. It was like, you haven't shared screen time, but we've been watching you across this whole season. I'm keeping it a little vague, or these two seasons. So it kind of felt like that, like, oh, this is a monumental one. We haven't been participating in her story, but I suspect that it's a good one when we get it.
Absolutely. Any thoughts as kind of the end this chapter? Anything from the Matt POV you want to talk about before we jump over to the women?
I would say it was definitely the feeling, and I allude to this at the top of the episode, this felt like, nothing happened here, right? We got to a city and we picked a tavern, and so that was the big surprise. And in terms of Matt chapters, I think I usually find them very fun, and maybe it's my own socialization and history, but feeling that kind of isolation is kind of painful and icky, right? And I think that's exactly the intended effect. But I'm like, oh, I didn't enjoy this, and I don't like our happy-go-lucky guy being stymied. So makes me a little nervous for Matt, and makes me a little dissatisfied. But I think that's what Robert Jordan wants.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And we won't resolve any of those issues in Chapter 48, Leaning on the Knife, which is more of the same. Nynaeve is naked because Robert Jordan. She dries and gets dressed, and she tries to ignore the symbolism of all of her rings, thinking about her relationships with Lan and the Aes Sedai. The women have been given a suite of extravagant rooms, and they begin to discuss their reception in the palace, and Nynaeve seems frustrated that they are still being treated as apprentices rather than as full Aes Sedai. The other Aes Sedai in the palace seemed shocked by their elevation to being full Aes Sedai, and Nynaeve seems furious, but Elaine, on the other hand, sees an opportunity to act independently if they are ignored by the other Aes Sedai. Nynaeve thinks of Egwene learning Birgitte's secret, and apparently she was not pleased about it, and even Birgitte seemed a little chastened when they finished their conversation. Nynaeve eventually brings up Matt to distract Birgitte from her past, but Elaine changes the conversation and invites... and then they begin to make plans to search the city. My notes were very confusing there. Eventually, they decide they need to find dresses to blend in, and at this point, a servant arrives and invites the three Aes Sedai to see the queen. Avienda eventually realizes that she is not an Aes Sedai, and that is an excuse to get out of this, and her and Birgitte go off on their own. At this point, Nynaeve and Elaine travel through the palace when Nynaeve spots Jaikim Carradine, apparently part of an embassy from the Children of the Light. Eventually, they meet Tylin, the queen of the city, or the area around the city, as she eventually claims, and they tell her that Avienda is not an Aes Sedai, but Tylin doubts that they are because of their age. Nynaeve angrily defends their credentials despite their age, and in her defense, she tells Tylin that Egwene is the same age they are, which is apparently not public knowledge, and surprises Tylin because they let a detail slip. Tylin expresses exhaustion at all of the secrets and surprises from the Aes Sedai, and Elaine tries to smooth things over, but Tylin eventually encourages them to speak freely, saying that they can lean on the knife. Elaine apologizes for the situation in Altara being made worse by the Aes Sedai, and apparently this is the first apology that Tylin has received from any of the Aes Sedai. Tylin eventually asks why 4 of them have come all at once, and makes it clear that she hates the White Cloaks but is willing to accept their embassy. Nynaeve calls Jaikim Carradine a butcher, and Tylin is shocked at how open they are willing to be. Nynaeve actually speaks her mind, which seems to kind of win over Tylin and makes her approve appreciate them, and she eventually clutches her marriage knife, showing her status as a widow who lost 3 of her sons to duels. Tylor then declares her intentions for her son to be the first to sit the throne for a long dynasty, despite the fact that it is not a guarantee that individuals will follow a linear dynasty in this kingdom. She apparently has fought to expand her influence beyond just the city walls, and she is proud of that and wants to continue onward. Tylor then says that she has now shared all of her kind of deepest, darkest ideas, and she wants them to share as well. Elaine then tells her of the bowl that they are seeking, and Tylor says that they seek the dangerous Rahad district, which must be where this is located. Tylor says that she can't do anything to deal with the Rahad because it would cause a riot, but she also compliments their openness and says that she will help them however she can. Eventually, they meet Beslan, her son, and after they leave her area, Nynaeve seems upset that Vandene and Adelius are potentially going to try to take over this search. Elaine says that they can handle the Rahad themselves because they dealt with Tanchico, and then she says they will find the bowl within 10 days. Hey, Greg, do you think they're going to find the bowl in the next 10 days?
I mean, it's always good to put a ticking clock on the board, right? That is all the Mission Impossible franchise is based on, really.
Yeah.
I thought I want to jump back to a question that you asked a minute ago. I found I had a lot of trouble figuring out Elaine in this chapter compared to the last one.
Got
right?
it, yeah.
So both that kind of vow that it will happen, but also just, the kind of moment where she's like, oh, and here's all our secret information all at once. And I think because we were in Nynaeve's perspective, it's like, well, are we supposed to see this as savvy or foolhardy? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is when it switches for me, because I think there's an argument to be made that Elaine is really trying to play the politician and almost be flowery and respectful and all of these things. And when Nynaeve breaks through seemingly by just being Jaikim Carradine is a jerk and I hate him, I think Elaine kind of makes the switch. And I'm not sure, as you're saying, how much of that is character growth and realizing oh, this is really a way to connect with someone versus how much of it is Elaine, the politician, figuring out what worked and adopting that almost as a facade because she know it will be effective. And that's the frustration of being in Nynaeve's POV. I think exactly as you say.
Yeah, and I mean, my first reaction is this ruler seems kind of terrible, but not despotic, right? But I don't know. It was hard to get a read on her, and then that made the move of Elaine to kind of grab her as an ally so quick all the more suspect to me. So I'm kind of yes-anding what you just said. It's yeah, so I'm unsure about that. And then it's well, this leader doesn't seem Robert Jordan has tended to show people who care more about the lowly and the young people, or the poor and the common people. That's the word I was looking for, to be the better leaders. And this is not somebody who strikes me as caring about anything other than their family lineage.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about Tylor in these scenes is simultaneously she is the most open, direct communicator we've had maybe in the whole series, right? She is not dissembling and doing the Aes Sedai conversation thing that seems so common among those who play the game of games, if you will. But she also is just very open about her ambitions. You're right. She is trying to win them over to her cause, and the way she does it is being let me be honest, I'm power hungry, and I would like the power to go to my son. And I think that kind of leaves me, as you're saying, I don't know that this is a moral human. I don't know how good they are, but they seem like someone I'd want to have a beer with, right? They pass the political test, even if they don't pass the good leader test. I don't know whether you've heard that way of
taking that very personally, since we often get beers. But I like what you're saying. It's devil you know versus the devil you don't know, right? It's okay, I know that they're being truthful with me, and I know what to expect from them, even if I don't like the choices they make. I think that is a fair assessment.
There's a famous theory of friendship that I forget who originally came up with it, so I'm not going to cite it correctly. But their theory was that you can evaluate another human with 2 questions. Would I want to have a couple beers with them, and would I leave my dog with them? And if the answer is no and no, you just go away from that person. And if the answer is yes and yes, they're a great person. But if it's oh, I wouldn't leave my dog with them, but I would have beers with them, they're fun, but they're not good people. I think that's Tylor, right?
Yeah.
I think that I would not trust her with my dog. I don't know that she's a morally good, like, upstanding person who would do the right thing, but I want to go hang out with Tylor, and she seems like a chill lady.
And now I'm just mentally evaluating all our shared friends. We'll compare notes off air.
I think the one good thing about her, though, is that she hates Jaikim Carradine, right? Anyone who hates the White Cloaks, that immediately is the moment that I'm like, oh, maybe Tylor isn't as terrible as she seems. Because I think you're right. She seems kind of iffy. We're spending a lot of time talking about Tylor, given that the beginning of this chapter doesn't involve her at all. So I'm just curious about the Nynaeve-Elaine dynamics at the beginning of this chapter, where it seems like Nynaeve is kind of evaluating a bunch of things that have happened in the past, with Birgitta's secret getting, known to Egwene and a few other things, and it seems like Nynaeve is just frustrated by things, which maybe ties into how we talked about the last chapter with Elaine taking the lead on so much of the interaction with Mat.
Yeah, I mean, so two strands coming out of that opening section is, why doesn't anybody treat me like I'm a real Aes Sedai, right? Like,
yeah.
And then the, like, we're not going to get distracted by Mat.
Yeah.
And it does feel like both like acting like an Aes Sedai so they treat you like one, and ignoring Mat are both the right choices to get the mission done, right?
Yeah.
And so even though that's the kind of source of some of the strife, it does feel like Elaine has a handle on that. I do like that, I think it would have been silly if everybody, especially Nynaeve, just was like, oh, okay, Elaine's going to be queen. We need to follow her now. Because they've been through a lot, and she's a little young and silly. And so, sometimes Nynaeve has the right to kind of question whether she'll make the right choices. And so it felt right to me, even though I do think everything we see suggests that Elaine is headed in the right direction.
Yeah, I really like that analysis, and I think you're just spot on about the Elaine-Nynaeve, like, dyad. I think that right now Elaine is kind of in that dominant position, and Nynaeve is frustrated by that, not because Elaine is doing a bad job, but just because sometimes anyone is going to lead in a way that is not great for the people they're leading. I think that's exactly right. The thing that I found kind of most interesting about Nynaeve in this section of the chapter is how much it feels like she is reactive, particularly to Adelias and Vandene and Adelias. And the reason why is actually something that I wanted to bring up from maybe a week or two ago. When we were in the head of the Aes Sedai who was stabbed in Camelin, the one who was with the embassy and then the Aiel attacked her, there was a really kind of pointed scene where the leader of the embassy was thinking to herself, what do I do if Varen steps in? And the reason why is because of this, priority among the Aes Sedai about who gets to take charge. And so there is this little plot line about Varen is the most powerful, but Mirana was given lead of the embassy, so who takes charge? I think that is maybe why Nynaeve is so frustrated in these scenes, is because she was expecting that Aes Sedai priority that is so powerful. Mirana basically gave up control of the embassy because Varen was there and can channel more of the power than she can. I'll bet Nynaeve really thought that as the most powerful channeler in a century, she would be the one in charge of everything with that Aes Sedai priority. And so still being treated as an apprentice has to feel not like just a demotion, but like a demotion below where she even would have been otherwise.
Yes, and so it was a little hard to remember here that this is still Nynaeve who's been like knocked low.
Yeah.
And it feels like why that I'm having trouble with that is because I think it's just previous experiences. Like, I expect her to be proud and leaderly. And so what you're describing, the kind of deference, suggests to me that, like, she's still lowly and kind of behind the times, but yet has been promoted and is essentially Elaine's second in command. So I can't figure out exactly Nynaeve's placement within this chapter in that regard.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pretend that I had those larger Aes Sedai plots in my head that you just described, but I do find myself kind of struggling to know what I'm expecting from Nynaeve in the next few chapters or whenever we get back to this plot line.
Yeah, and I think that's right. Is Nynaeve feels very off-center in these chapters, and she's a much more passive observer than I think she often is, right? I think one of the complaints about Nynaeve chapters is how often they are about Nynaeve clenching her skirt instead of what's happening in the chapter, and this feels like the opposite of that. It almost feels like Nynaeve is in like pure narrator mode. We're not getting as much of her internal dialogue as we often do, and I think that's maybe really good writing by Robert Jordan, but it's also like we've now had back-to-back Matt and Nynaeve chapters who are probably our most distinctive voices in the series, and both of them felt a bit muted.
That's nicely observed, and I do think that, to go back to your opening question, that's part of why this kind of it feels very late to not be sure of ourselves, right? It feels like by the time you get to the last 20% of a book, you'd kind of dealt with all the character issues and would steam towards the big plot finale. And these two chapters, to your, explanations, are just kind of purely feeling like character figuring it out, they're unsteady or off balance, to steal your word, in a way that you would have expected would have been settled 200 pages ago, so they could be balanced for the final battle. So maybe that's pointing towards cliffhanger. I'm not sure.
So we talked quite a bit about Tylor the character and about how the characters are kind of figuring out how to interact with her. I'm really curious about just your evaluation at the end of this conversation. The girls end up deciding Tylor is really open, will be really open. They tell her more or less everything about their mission. Good idea, bad idea?
That always makes me nervous. So I'm going bad idea. I don't have a reason to really think Tylor is, a Forsaken or something. But when you are sent on a secret mission, the point is to keep it secret and to try to get it settled. So that makes me very nervous for what they revealed so easily. And that's why I feel like it's a very un-Elaine move. I hear what you're saying about like maybe it was to kind of make a political point, but I'm still worried it was a miscalculation.
Well, and I think it's very telling that Tylor is like, oh, that would be an incredible thing. I can do absolutely nothing to help you. And so when you invest that much trust into something that seemingly produces no results other than the queen wants to have tea with you, it feels like, at least in the short term, this is not a good deal. And so it's going to have to pan out pretty well for Elaine to feel like she kind of came out on top here. At the end of the chapter, Nynaeve is frustrated that Vandene and Adelias might take over, and they insist they're going to get these things done in 10 days. I don't have anything to say about that, Greg. What were your kind of takeaways at the end of this chapter?
I mean, I don't trust when anybody who's not in our main core group of characters is really taking the action seat. I think if they feel very red shirty to me, so it wouldn't surprise me if they get disappeared or get destroyed in some kind of machinations, and then our main characters have to take it over. But more than anything, I'm just feeling like 10 days feels like about 130 pages, right? Like I feel like this is really coming to an end more quickly than the characters realize. And again, that could mean cliffhanger, or it just means, things are going to happen quickly when we return to this. I will say, not that you asked this question, I do think we're going to get Abu Dar resolved mostly in this book. I mean, it might be a climax where, a cliffhanger occurs, but I don't think we're done with this plot line. As I think when we finished the Egwene chapters, I was like, this is an okay place to leave Egwene if that's where we have to leave Egwene. And I'm pretty sure we left Egwene now, but I could be wrong. You can't say, so we'll have to see.
You literally took all 3 points of the way that I wanted to say that. At the beginning, I was going to be like, yeah, we're seeing new characters in the next chapter title, it seems like. Do you think we're going to come back? And then I was like, because you said we were done with Egwene, and then I was going to ask, do we finish this book? We do, according to you. I had to say all that so that we didn't end in 35 minutes of this podcast. Wasn't a long one. We didn't expect it to be. We have 2 chapters next week, and just a heads up, they are 2 chapters that add up to almost our longest week ever in terms of word count. So that is chapter 49, The Mirror of the Mists, and chapter 50, Thorns. And in case you're wondering, we only have 3 weeks left, including that, so get ready for the chapters to keep being long. Greg, what do you expect from those chapters in our final 3 weeks of the book?
Yeah, I'm looking. It's like 42 in my mass market paperback. And Tyler knows because we record this with my camera on. I do keep looking wistfully over at my shelf where the next books are all lined up, ready to go. And it's always exciting when we get to that place. And I'm excited that we'll check this off in August so I can fill in my reading spreadsheet. But it's all going well. Still enjoying the book. Very curious to see how this comes together or doesn't come together. And the only way to do that is to say Through the Glass Columns.
So ends another episode of Through the Glass Columns. We thank you for joining us and continuing with us on our quest to cover all of the Wheel of Time in our own sweet time.
This podcast features original content developed by Tylor Orm and Greg Cass and is not in any way affiliated with, associated with, or condoned by the Robert Jordan Estate, Tor Fantasy, Amazon, or our wives. All content is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only.
If you're enjoying this podcast, please seek out the books from your local bookshop or library and join us as we continue our journey. If you'd like to contact us to share your thoughts or give feedback, find us on Instagram or Threads by searching Through the Glass Columns.
Thank you once again for being a part of this community. If you're enjoying the show, please subscribe, leave us a review wherever you are listening, and recommend this show on your social media to help us grow our community. We look forward to welcoming you back next time on Through the Glass Columns.